Hey, pod people, Kate here in the second in a series on Ayurveda and the mind. We've been talking about anxiety, depression, and the doshas of the mind. The conversation about mind can feel a little heavy. It can be a little scary, even, especially as we start tuning in to what's going on up there. What I love to do and what we're going to do in today's episode is talk about how to cultivate good space. And the mind is a system that is primarily space. As you may have noticed, it's full of all kinds of crap, some good stuff, some not good stuff. And when you create good space around you in ways that can be easy and fun, it will begin to affect the internal spaces as well. So stay tuned for some really practical stuff about how to beautify your space inside and out. Don't go anywhere. We're getting into it right after this. Welcome to Everyday Ayurveda with Kate, a podcast that translates ancient wisdom for modern lives. I'm your host, Kate O'Donnell. I've been living and teaching Ayurveda, India's traditional medicine, for over 25 years, and I've authored 4 best-selling books on bringing Ayurveda practices into our lives. If you're tired of battling digestive issues, hormonal imbalances, menopause symptoms, or are seeking a deeper spiritual connection and purpose, you're in the right place. This podcast is for you, offering practical, accessible advice to help you heal through diet, optimize your daily routines, and enhance your overall well-being. Follow this space for insights on a diet that heals, strategies for better digestion, sleep, hormone health, and direction for finding a deep sense of meaning and purpose. Join me, my pod people, for this empowering journey into self-care and self-discovery. Together, we'll explore how to bring balance and vitality into your everyday life. Let's do this. So in part 1 of this series, my pod people, we talked about doshas of the mind, rajas and tamas. So we talked about how we can be a little too go, go, go. And that can cause sort of racing thoughts and difficulty sleeping, reactivity, feeling out of control and overwhelmed. And we talked about how sometimes it's slow, slow, slow. And then we can feel heavy and have a brain fog, difficulty making decisions, procrastination, and feeling sad, heavy. The good news is that the state of the mind, without disturbance, without the doshas making those problems, is a clear space that perceives reality as it is. And there is something about acceptance. Accepting things as they are is a part of how we build a strong and healthy mind. The Sanskrit word sukha means happiness and also means good space. So Ayurveda works by promoting good space, whether it's your internal world, like we've talked about the stomach and the intestines as spaces, right? We want what goes on in those spaces to feel good and be good and work good. We also have our external world, the body, the mind, and the environment, and creating good vibes in not just the body, but also the mind, the mental space, and in the environment around us. Those are all ways that we create sukha, or this good space, happiness. And it's also an aspect of healthiness, sukha. And it really is the aim of Ayurveda, is to make the body better, but also to make the planet better, to make the world that we came into better because of our actions. That's sukha. And whether you're raising a family or you're living alone, taking a little time to create good space and natural beauty. We're going to use natural beauty in our space to encourage positive vibes in the mind. It's not rocket science. It's something that's even fun, right? Is to sort of beautify the external world. And this isn't about major redecorating projects. It's simply turning your attention to inspiring sights smells, sounds, tastes, and activities. Because when we're really going, it can feel like just another chore, right? Or just another thing to do to follow these suggestions. But think of some of the suggestions I'm going to talk about with you today as setting intentions for your overall peace of mind, right? It's like you walk into your space and you're met with a vision of something that you set there in order to inspire good vibes. The more of that that's going on, the more TLC that you spend on your external environment, it will slowly affect the landscape of the mind and vice versa. So the transformation we're talking about is twofold. I mean, one, you make your environment a wonderful and beautiful place to be. Two, you take pleasure in this beautification of your environment. You're creating good space within with that sort of pleasure, that pleasantness. So this might require a shift in the way you think about housework, right? We are going to talk a little bit about cleaning and tidying today. But why not see it as an opportunity to create beauty? So it's a mind shift about some of the things that we are already doing anyway. I personally catch myself getting fed up with washing dishes all the time. So for me, dishes are like a primary opportunity to practice sukha, creating good space, right? Sometimes I can relax into the activity that I'm doing and just kind of enjoy it. So you want to start as we get into these suggestions with just one simple thing, something that's doable rather than trying to purify and beautify your least favorite thing, right? Like cleaning the tub. Some people actually, I think, do clean the tub as a way to create good space because then they take a bath, then they bathe in that clean tub. And I think that's a great example, of how we sort of promote good health and good vibes with creating a good space in which we're going to, do this thing that makes us feel more peaceful or more ourselves. So I'm a kitchen person. I think that's the space in my house that I probably spend the most time and spend the most time on. I write all these cookbooks and as well. And I do, we ended our last episode talking about how nature is the balm for imbalances of mind and that keeping our foods as natural as possible. Nobody needs to be perfect here. And, a Reese's peanut butter cup, if that's your favorite thing in the world, can absolutely inspire feelings of good space, especially memories potentially of other times when you had peanut butter cups, right? So the good space, and the natural nature of our food, it doesn't have to be perfect, but the more often our food is in a natural state, like a whole grain, an actual fruit, an actual vegetable, even our meats, the more that you know about where you get your animal foods from, are potentially able to visit the farms, the animals, that kind of thing is all part of how we create this good space and how our food then becomes a vehicle for manifesting the goodness. And that's, I think, a big part of it, is moving towards more good natural food as a way to promote good and natural space. And your mind will be different depending on what you eat. Absolutely. So a great way to end up in that slow camp is by eating a lot of processed foods that require your body to give energy to digesting them, but there's really not nutrition in them. And there's a lot of food out there like that really slows us down by not giving us much, or the body has to work really hard to extract the energy from the food. We can get ourselves into a problem by using stimulants too often, things like, caffeinated beverages or really white sugary things that kind of make you get high, give you energy to kind of keep going in the moment. But it's like stealing from Peter to pay Paul, so later you go. It's a great way to set up a Rajas into Tamas event, is to overdo sugar or caffeine and then feel depressed next. And that happens with drugs, that happens with alcohol, right? We get high and then we get low. And there's this kind of swing. Whereas the good space we're looking for is this is sort of even keel in between place. And so it can feel a little less like woohoo, like, yeah, we're going on a roller coaster. It can feel a little less like that kind of excitement and a little more kind of measured as we go through our days. And I'm somebody who likes to have some fun. I definitely like to blow it all out of the water from time to time. And I know that when I do, I'm gonna feel low and I'm gonna feel kind of sad after. And I'm ready for that. I've been there enough times that I see it now for what it is. I don't go into, oh, I'm so sad or I'm so low or I'm a piece of crap or whatever it is. Like all those thoughts are there, but I'm like, oh, this is just a reaction to how much fun I had yesterday and, didn't get enough sleep or didn't digest enough nourishing food. And so now I feel kind of crappy. So, okay. Like a lot of the time it was worth it for me. I told you I like to have fun. So I'll feel like, oh, okay, this is the price we pay. And I'll try to like get off my butt and do some movement if I can. And do the things that create the good space, rather than for me kind of wallowing in the disturbed thoughts of the mind. And it's really easy to get kind of caught in wallowing in the disturbed thoughts of the mind, whether they're of the slow and sad nature or whether they're of the kind of crazy, hard to control nature. I experience both at different times. I am no stranger to imbalances of the mind. Maybe that's why I wrote a book about it. Maybe that's why I'm making this podcast about it. Also, because you asked, right? I had questions from you guys about specifically anxiety and depression and wanted to speak to that. It's such a common conversation. And if you have questions, things you want to talk about on this podcast, I love that. I love to know who's on the other side and to talk to you. So please do. You can DM me on Instagram at kateodonnell.ayurveda. You can also send an email to my business email, hello@ayurvedicliving.institute. And we'll put both of those things in the show notes so you can reach out if there's things you're wondering about, or if you want to follow up on this conversation that we're having today. So let's get back to the kitchen, right? So, yes, what you eat and its nature affects the nature of your mind for sure. And obviously the nature of your body. But let's talk about what do your senses meet when you move into the kitchen, right? Can we get one thing I love in the kitchen is something that's alive, so flowers, or plants. Keeping something like I do tend to keep cut flowers around and in the kitchen. That's where I keep them. Other rooms as well, like the office, but living things like plants and flowers they're just fantastic. And the activity of taking care of them is also really good. I change the water every day in my cut flowers. I talk to them and I prune them, and they're like my little friends, for as long as they're alive. And I do the same with the plants, the house plants. And I find that to be a very good space kind of activity to do. So keeping a thing like that around, getting a plant if you don't have one, or treating yourself to some flowers from time to time. These can also be flowers that you find in nature and then bring into your house. They don't live as long, but hey, it's still great. It's still fantastic. Color. Color is therapy for the mind, because the mind's job, my friends, a lot of what the mind does is digests the information that the senses bring in. So your eyes and your ears and your tongue and your nose, even the feelings, the sensations on the skin, all that stuff is coming in all the time. Your mind's primary job is to make sense of that stuff. So the senses is really what we're talking about here as therapy for the mind. And we want to bring good, kind of uplifting and natural things to the senses. And the more of nature is there, the closer that brings us to our true individual nature. And that is the idea that I am made of the same stuff as everything around me, as all the creatures and the objects and the trees and the sky. We're all made of these same 5 elements. That is our composition. And then, we have the things that we're sensing are of the five elements. We're tasting the nature of food, we're smelling the nature of the food, we're viewing the nature when we look outside or when we spend time outside. And we can listen to nature, listening, tuning into the sounds of birds and things like that. And music is a therapy as well, of course, for the senses. And so if we think about all these things that are coming in, our food, our music, and our podcasts, our information, the sights that we see, the colors that we wear, the colors that we use in our homes, the colors that are present on our plate, that are there in our food, the materials that we're handling, like our silverware, our plates, our linens, our glasses, like all of these things, they're coming into your field. They matter. They matter. They're a great place to work, actually, on creating positive vibes for the senses, which then creates positive vibes for the mind, which then creates positive vibes for the world. And then we're walking the path. It's such a great feeling. And then you start to feel like you're doing what you came here to do, like you're a part of the life stream. When the mind is out of balance, you'll often not feel like that. You won't feel like you're a part of the life stream. You'll be wondering what the hell you're doing here, or feeling like you're not making the right contribution or enough of a contribution, or you have no idea how to even begin making a contribution or what that means, right? And I think these are the kinds of things that plague a lot of us. And so what I'm suggesting is that we have this answer available to us, which is very tangible, right? It's not about, oh, what job do I need to get, or what class do I need to take, or who do I need to, impress or talk to. It's what's on my plate. What kind of plate am I using? What is my placemat like, right? Where am I shopping for food? What colors are around me? These kinds of things are very much kind of, they're more in our control. They're more in our control. And it can be simple. I don't want you to think you have to overhaul everything, in order to, this does not have to be fancy. It can be a very simple thing that sets the intention and is there for you as a reminder. That's why I like flowers, because they're kind of simple. So when we're talking about colors, the colors we're looking for, the sort of what we call sattvic colors, or colors that inspire this good space, are a little more on the neutral side, a little more on the little soft, a little bit on the soft side. Not so much screaming, yeah, and not so deep and dark either, but a little bit on the kind of light and neutral side. So, I love things like very pale mint and like eggshell in the kitchen, peach, things like that. You might have some sort of a light blue. You imagine how these colors, you can look for these colors in textiles and in plates and cups and things like that. I mean, most of our kitchen stuff, I'll be honest with you, has been just gifted to us. So we have everything's white. I'm cool with that, right? Everything's white. It's a big set that we're gifted. And that to me, that's like a nice neutral space. So it feels really good. And when you think about the materials that you're using, of course, we want to move towards natural things, like bamboo and cast iron and ceramics. We're lucky enough to have a neighbor who is into pottery. We have some of her items, and that's such a great feeling as well. But thinking about, using natural sponges and reusing our wipes and things rather than using disposable stuff. Like some of these things might be possible for you now, and some of them might not. Some of them might call to you and some of them might not, right? But these are kinds of just things to think about in how we create space, and view space. One of the things I know my readers have gotten really into over the years is how I talk about organizing the pantry and organizing the spice rack. People get really just, it's such a great feeling, where you're like, yes, I did that. I'll get canning jars or save a bunch of nut butter jars. And canning jars are pretty inexpensive. You can get them at a hardware store, or a lot of stores you'll find have them now. and just, a big wide mouth, not a small mouth because it's really hard to get the stuff in and out of them. But a wide mouth jar is a great place to keep your grains and your legumes, and then kind of keeps your pantry a little less overwhelming for you, so that when you're moving towards the activity of making food, you can be like, yeah, this feels nice, to me, that this is all like in glass. I can see what's in everything. There's not like little bags here and there with God knows what from when in there. I do teach a seasonal rotation of the pantry. If you go to the Everyday Ayurveda cookbook, you'll find all that info about sort of, what are our ideal foods to eat in each season, the grains, the legumes, the spices. I do a little rotating there in order to keep things fresh. And the spices, I love to either keep them in little jars. I really like those magnet ones that stick to the side of the fridge. But what I actually have is a spice box. So it's like a round box, about 8 inches in diameter, that has little small cups in it. And you can find these on Amazon. You can find these at an Indian market. And they're so fun and fantastic. And then you open the thing and all your spices you get like 8 spices at one time. So you're not pulling this and this and this and this out of the rack. Because a lot of Ayurveda food does include a nice array of spices. And that's part of how we please the senses, is with all these flavors, all these tastes. That's one of the reasons that spices are such an important part of the cooking. And you want to think about like eating in a sane setting. Friends, this is so important, that we are not moving and eating at the same time, and that we're not moving the attention, the mind around and eating at the same time. We want the attention on the food as often as possible. It's not going to be all the time, but as often as possible. So potentially turning off the TV and putting the phone far enough away that you can't reach it. You'd have to get up and go over there and get it. So potentially when you're eating, you're actually just eating. Imagine that, right? When you're eating, all you're doing is eating. Eating is a really big and important job. And the mind loves going very quickly from thing to thing to thing. It can feel kind of like trying to take a new puppy for a walk, to get your mind to concentrate on one thing at a time. And meals times are a great place to practice that, because you have to eat anyway, right? So you want to sit down, and this is where we get back to creating a good space. I think having a good space where you sit down to eat is huge. I've had some I have some friends who have this really cute habit of bringing an actual cloth napkin in with their lunch. These are people who go to work and eat at work. They bring a little cloth napkin, which I think is just the cutest thing ever. And taking pleasure in sort of the color or the pattern of the cloth napkin. I love to make napkins. I buy fabric and make napkins as presents for people. I think napkins are a super fun way to add a little bit of color. So if you're bringing a lunch, I think taking care in the what you're bringing your lunch in, that you have a good little kit, that you like this thing when you would buy the food thermos and you get the insulated bag, it will last you a decade, right? You don't need to, it doesn't have to be a crazy thing, right? And what you get for your kit will last a really, really long time. And it just kind of keeps you organized, and it keeps you feeling like you kind of have your shit together, let's say, when it's time to eat. And I think having that space, whether you're taking food on the road or also at home, or if you have to kind of eat at a job, you want to eat at your home and at your job, you want to try to have some sort of a ritualistic creation of good space when you eat. And that could happen with something like a cloth napkin or a fancy kit. Or if it's home, you know, take the time to, even if you're just alone and it's in the middle of the day, or even if it's kind of just a snack, that you have the presence of mind to realize that you're eating and to sit down and do it in a place where you are used to eating. So it's not happening kind of willy-nilly all over the place. You're not standing there and eating. You're not scrolling and eating, right? You're sitting down and you're paying attention to this glorious food, this glorious gift of nature that is entering the body. And what's so great about that is that you really use that as an opportunity to calm the mind. It really focuses the mind and calms the mind. And you get better nourishment out of your food when you eat in this manner. So it's really a 2 for 1. And there's no great reason not to do it, right? Except that you'll catch yourself not doing it all the time, right? The good news about that is that in the conversation in Ayurveda about the mind and mental imbalance, there is something that's called a crime against intelligence. It's when you know what the healthy, good thing to do is, but you observe yourself not doing it. You observe yourself doing the other thing, right? So it's like you're standing there eating and you suddenly realize that you're standing there eating and you're like, oh, geez, look at me. Here I am standing. I'm standing here eating. How often does that happen, right? Probably often. That's called pradnya parad, crime against intelligence. I love that there is a Sanskrit word for that. When I learned that, I was liberated because previously I would kind of hide away all the things that I did wrong and quote wrong, right? All of the bad choices and bad habits that I was doing all the time. I knew they weren't good for me. I would like hide away in this, oh, I'm such a bad person. And then I was just like, oh my God, it's human nature. This has been going on for thousands of years. There's a Sanskrit name for this thing that we all do, which is to know what is a healthy choice and then observe ourselves choosing something else. And that's a hard place to be. It's a hard place to be in the conversation on mental wellness when you're starting to see things like, say, we have this conversation today, and they're like, oh man, yeah, she's right. Like, I really don't respect my food. I really don't respect my meals. Like, I'm doing all kinds of stuff, and when I'm eating and I'm really not paying attention. And then you can't, and then so then tomorrow there you are doing your habit, you're doing your thing, and you're like, oh man, Kate was just talking about this yesterday, and here I am doing it. And then on day 3, there you are still doing it, right? I'm just calling it out because we all do it. And here's what helps with this, friends, is you watch yourself do it day 1, day 2, day 3. Start to notice if the thing is making you feel bad. Whether it's like, oh, when I eat, like standing up and running around and doing all this stuff, like I finish eating and I'm kind of still hungry because I didn't even pay attention. I don't even know what I ate. Or, I feel kind of like I'm burping and gassy and weird because I was, running around while eating. Or you feel like bad about yourself because you're like, oh, I know it's going to be better for me. I know I want to do this thing of paying attention and really being present for my food and my digestion and calming my mind. I know I want to do it, but I'm not doing it. And you notice yourself just kind of feel bad. So if all those things are going on, and I'm using this example of, food and meal times, but this process goes on in the mind in a cajillion different ways, doesn't it? Where it's a habit we do in our relationships, or it's a habit we, lash out at so and so the same way every time they do X, So there's a lot of these habitual moments where we do a thing and we know it's not the good thing to do, but we just keep doing it. That's pradnya parad. It is considered a mental malfunction. We all do it. It's human nature. And awareness of it, knowing it is kind of like the first step. And that's the difficult place to be in, is where you've learned some of these new things, but you haven't implemented them yet. So you're just you have this intuition or this sense that X thing would be good for me, but I'm still kind of caught in this habit. And that's why I say, if habit is driving, stop the car, right? Back it up, turn the wheel, and start moving in a new track. Because if you keep driving through the same track in the mud, it just gets deeper. It just gets deeper. So the change, of creating the balance, the happier habit, is in that first effort. And then you will still commit the crime against intelligence, and you'll still find yourself doing the other thing again. And you just have a laugh, right? And be like, wow, humans are just, we're just nuts, aren't we? That we keep doing this thing, or we keep reacting in the same way to this thing that causes this reaction that is so unpleasant for me in my life or for this other person that I care about. Yet I keep doing it, right? That's the process, is to be aware of this whole process. And then you make the choice as often as possible. You make the choice to do the thing that you know creates good space for you and for the world. You keep making that choice over and over again, and you will still make the other choice. The less beneficial choice will also happen at times. And it's okay. That's how you get there, right? You don't get your car out of the mud on the first try every time. You got to keep back up, turn, forward, back up, turn, forward, right? So that's what we're doing. And I just want to support you in any effort that you make and celebrate any time that you choose the healthier habit or the healthier reaction. Anytime you do that is like party time, happy time. And awareness of the thing that's the tough spot when you just start to see it. Conversations like today's are the ones that might help you start seeing those things. And it can be a little bit of a process to get to the next place. So when you create good space in your environment, the flowers in the kitchen or the neutral kind of soft colors in your space, or you're using more natural foods in your diet, or you're using more natural fibers in your clothes or in your linens, you keep reaching for things that are natural whenever possible, whenever you have that choice and that resource that you're doing it. That's the path. That's your walk in the path. You're creating the good space around you. And the last thing I want to say, and this is such a great way to create good space, and this one's free and doesn't really require a lot of your time, is to keep it simple. The thing about the mind is that it likes to fill up space, right? The mind loves to fill up spaces. And if we can allow for space and enjoy and spread out into space, that will create good vibes. So buying less stuff, doing less, talking less, scrolling less, there's a lot of the just keeping it simple and having less stuff in your space actually is going to simplify the internal space as well. And that's going to feel awesome. That's going to feel really good. So keeping it simple and having maybe a little more space on the calendar, a little more space in the fridge, a little more space in the closet, just kind of clearing out stuff and keeping space clean and clear, that is going to make the mind feel so much calmer. Absolutely. And this is kind of common sense, right? Things we know. I'm just reminding you about some of these things that are in our field all the time that are affecting the mind. And so the conversation of creating balance in the mind has to do not only with being aware of what's going on in the mind and the energies that are at work there, but also creating external spaces that mirror kind of what we want to be feeling internally. So you can work the inside spaces, you can work the outside spaces, and from all of these places, you will receive benefits and feel better. I hope this was a helpful one for you. Again, questions, comments, you can send them to me over on Instagram or by email. Thanks so much for being here, guys. I appreciate you, and have a great rest of the day.